Hey, Joaquin, at last, you and I, we managed to speak.
Yes, I'm so glad that we're finally doing this. We went back and forth for like over a month, I think,
I
to
think years.
it feels like years.
Couldn't find a time that worked. There was always something happening. And I know you through really largely through your association with Tom Luongo. And I know you
Yes.
do regular podcasts with him and stuff and great conversations, which I listen to. And he's on my channel at least once a month, sometimes more often. And he suggested you got to get Joaquin on. You got to get.
Yeah,
I'd already
yeah.
thought of that, and he said I'll connect you. And I said no, I'll just reach out to you. So great to have you on. Do you want to say where people can find you?
Yeah, primarily on Telegram at New Resistance. So New Resistance on Telegram, Joaquin Flores at New Resistance. That's the best place to find me. I have found, the least censorship and easiest place to find me. I'm also on Instagram. I'm no longer on Twitter, thanks to censorship, but we'll find out why I'm censored maybe in a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you're censored so much, right? Because there's censorship by omission, and then there's direct deletion. Because there's stuff that you say that the establishment or the powers that be or the globalists don't want people to know about. I
That is the
suspect.
word. Yeah, that is, I think that's what's going on. So,
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, where should we begin?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there are so many things going on in the world. I guess a little bit of background. I'm doing open source intelligence. Many, many decades ago, I was, in a position to do intelligence work in the United States uh, with three-letter agencies. And my instructor mentor at the university, California State University at the time, said, "Hey, Joaquin, call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for dinner." He says, you're gonna be a giant. Anything you want to do, he's working for Central Intelligence. And my commitments at the time, I was like, this is not for me. And that has kind of tracked my career ever since. I went into the field of labor organizing, social movements. This is obviously very important stuff that people talk about color revolutions and coups around the world. So I proceeded to become an expert in social movements, social history, dynamics of class power. There's obviously going to be a strong emphasis on international relations. And so I would move to Belgrade, I would become a consultant in the arena of color revolutions, security studies, social stability, consulting governments and political parties in power through the Balkans and some other countries as well.
Mhm.
I would go on to work with a number of different groups. Some of them are banned in the United States, or we're talking about connect allegations that these are think tanks that are run by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Um, so a lot of my work for the public in terms of just essays and things that are readable and approachable are on the Foundation. You should never provide a link for that. You might even have to you might even have to bleep out those words because it's very sensitive. You can't even put a screenshot of the logo on Instagram.
Wow.
Um, and it's named in I was named in numerous Senate Select Committee intelligence reports. Um, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And I've come under U.S. Treasury sanctions and received letters from OFAC, Office of Sanctions Enforcement. And um, and this has been, a roller coaster of a ride of a life. I did a number of years ago a newspaper called Fort Russ News that came under a lot of attack and also probably got me in trouble a little bit. Again, what's interesting, Rich, is that, no racism, no anti-Semitism, no bigotry, right? We're just talking about intelligence, what's going on in the world, without any narrative about people groups, without any exclusionary rhetoric, nothing, nothing hate, nothing that they could call right wing or far extremist, nothing. We're just talking about understanding the world. What is so dangerous about that? And I guess we're going to find out. But that has been last year. Came to visit family in the United States. I was detained by the FBI for quite a number of hours. And you know, that's just par for the course, as they say. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay. Very, very curious and dangerous times we live in. I just
Yes.
want to say, I should have said this earlier. It's Thursday, the 20th of November, and we're recording this at just after 7:30 UK time. And I'm saying that so that people can time this with news events because things happen so quickly.
Yes.
I did try and post out on X one of your culture, SCS, and it just wouldn't go.
Yeah, they
It
won't let
just
you.
said it's what is it, dangerous content or something like that. Couldn't post it. And it was such a great article. It's very, very insightful because and you and I talked a bit about this before we started recording. There's what the mainstream media presents, and there's what politicians and the power brokers present. And really, the mainstream media is their megaphone,
Right.
power brokers' megaphone. It very rarely speaks truth to power. And those that do speak truth to power are marginalized, omitted from the discourse, or censored in some way.
That's it.
So, your
You
what
posted this and it didn't even let you post it. You
yeah,
tried to post this. Yeah. I mean, so I was removed from X Twitter and I have a new, you know, startup burner account on there, you know, 700 followers, but this is orders of magnitude. I was probably 185,000 followers, almost 200,000 followers, in 2017, 16, 17. And Hillary Clinton lost that election, blamed the Russians, although I'm American. uh, and consequently, it was a conspiracy that that Trump had colluded with the Russians and that the Russians had done something to make Hillary Clinton lose that election. And that was experienced, it was a huge censorship crisis across YouTube.
yeah,
Not a platform that I had ever invested in, fortunately, because I would have lost those assets. But it was, people remember something called Adpocalypse around April of 2017. Adpocalypse is when Google AdSense added a whole list of channels to a ban list. I mean, it was a huge part of YouTube was just basically deleted. And the rates of advertising, which a lot of content creators were relying upon those revenues, was cut in by half, about 50%, 60%. So that was called Adpocalypse 2017. And all of that was a result of Hillary Clinton, you know, and you know, the power group around her and their influence with Alphabet, Google, YouTube, and you know, what they were treating the Trump phenomenon. Like this is just a bump in the road. This is an anomaly. This is a temporary problem, crisis. But in 4 years, we'll return to normal. And that was they just treated it as if, you know, Trump, all right, he's won the election. Technically, we're alleging Russian collusion, Russian interference. Legally, he's the president. But in terms of the intelligence and their presumed moral or ethical approach to dealing with the Trump phenomenon, they treated it and him as if it was an anomaly, or an
mm,
accident, a mistake, and not a mandate, despite the fact that he had a mandate legally. And you know, there was a lot of gerrymandering, so to speak, or gaming with the perception of the public. Everyone is in society, and we all have a kind of a sense of where people's heads are at. You know, we all have a sense of 60%, 70% of people think such and such about what have you, right?
mm,
And those were the very dangerous truths that they needed to keep from people was that, you know, a majority of people, you know, they might not have supported Trump per se, just talking on that subject, but they had certain views about certain things, you know, that might have comported with strong elements of Trump's campaign or message or platform. And you know, they were trying to amplify, we're talking about the power elite at this time, Hillary Clinton and those beyond Hillary Clinton, just to sort of give it a symbol or a name at the time, 2016, 2017. They had this uh, very strong history and impulse to create a false sense of normal, to create a false sense of average or what the normative or norm view among people is. And they pushed very hard to create a hyper reality, like in the sense of like a matrix, if you will,
mm,
you know, a simulacrum, you know. And this is not my idea. This is like in their own foundational social theories that they draw from um, Frankfurt School, structuralism and post-structuralism, the French versions of the German. They have people like Baudrillard, who really deconstructed through this lens of understanding how in post-modernity, like in this arena that we're in of reality, how ideas and our whole perception of reality can be driven by a hyper reality that's created by media and control of media. So they basically needed to control our perception of reality, Rich.
Yeah. Now, just on that, Joaquin, right? And I don't want to get too philosophical because then it'd be like talking to my brother,
Yeah, yeah,
who's
yeah.
who's actually read Foucault. And when I wanted to learn about Foucault, I went to him and said, "Look, can you explain it to me? Because
Yeah,
I can't make head or tail of it, right?" But the hold on one second, Joaquin.
yeah.
Just realized something.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to cut this bit out.
All right.
I was wondering, what is that thing above my head? I left the light on.
Oh, all right.
The Russiagate hoax,
Yes,
actually, the Russiagate coup.
yes,
So people, I think most people that they either believe, yeah, 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 Trump is Putin's puppet, or they're like, it was a hoax by Hillary. What they may not know is that it started with MI6 in the
right.
UK, Richard Dearlove, and then Christopher Steele, and then
Yes,
passing that information on to Obama, I think via John McCain,
correct.
right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
then it blowing up, Obama and Biden leading the whole thing.
yes.
My question to you is, why was it so critical to MI6 that they get rid of Trump?
Because the British have been committed for over 150 years ish to deconstruct Russia. I mean, you can go back to the Crimean War, you can go back to the 19th century. The problem for them, for the British, is that Russia is too big. These are the words that have been also echoed by people like Madeleine Albright, um, and the American side. Uh, Russia is too big. So they have been. You can go back to World War One, and you can go back to the Russian Revolution, when the Western powers, among them, um, in particular the British, were influential and critical in getting the Mensheviks into power, the Kerensky government, right? Kerensky basically signed off on handing over regions of the Russian Empire to become independent republics, to be exploited at will by the British. We're talking about Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, etc. So you understand the British role, of course, and influence in Persia and Iran at this time. Um, they were very formative, and of course, they were behind the coup, in the early 1920s that led to the rise of Shah Pahlavi. So their critical focus, of course, on the Black Sea, on the Caucasus, on the Crimean Peninsula, containment and their conflicts or alliances against Russia with the Ottoman Empire. So this goes back, to the 19th century. And, even Rich, when we think about Hitler and World War II, where we think about where did these ideas about containing Russia or deconstructing Russia, occupying Russia, dividing Russia, even in World War II, right? The planners of this on the German side, these were men that were born in the 1870s, right? So these are ideas from a bygone era. And these are ideas, Rich, that arise from a time when countries like India and China were, backwater colonies mired by underdevelopment and could provide no strategic alternative. So, in other words, the strategy for a very long time has been to surround and isolate and contain Russia with the idea that you could break it apart and that the British could manage in the way that they had, managed countries in the Middle East, or the way that they had managed in their conflict with the Spanish countries in the Caribbean, how they could manage how they controlled or tried to manage China during the opium crisis and how they weaponized opium to keep China divided in its whole period of warlordism. It didn't even emerge from that until the 20s and 30s, you
Okay.
know? So,
Okay. Now I can understand the British. I mean, I could ask you a question, but I think I know
yeah,
what the answer is,
yeah,
unless you think it's something else, right? So I know about the Mackinder-Hartland theory, the
yeah,
idea
yeah,
that by a British guy called Mackinder, that what we want to do is control the center of the Eurasian landmass, and that'll give dominion over the world pretty much.
yeah,
And that Britain and Russia have long been imperial rivals, with neither conquering the other. And Britain would want Russia broken up in order to access the $75 trillion worth of estimated resources that it
sure.
has. All that
Yeah.
land, all that lumber, the silver, the gold, the
Oh,
oil,
yeah.
the gas,
Hmm.
right? And
Yes. The rare earths,
nickel,
yeah.
titanium, whatever, right? Plus
Yeah.
also, it's because it's never been conquered, it always remains being a bulwark against British expansionism.
Correct.
So then is it that they wanted to get rid of Trump because Trump was saying, let's make peace with Russia?
Correct.
Or is
Correct. I
there
mean,
is there more to it?
this is what that's it. I mean, the layer there, right? So you have people like Mackinder and Reich that have elaborated. Again, these are men born in the 19th century, and their worldview, right? Like this is almost worldview studies. Like their worldview is kind of predetermining this idea. Like think about what goals are, Rich. Like, why do people get these wild hairs up their ass and they get this is where they're fixated on this goal. The goal was to destroy, occupy, or break apart Russia. That was only possible if the rest of the world is also underdeveloped. They didn't think that back in the 19th or 20th century because those were just the givens of the day, right?
Hmm.
But since around the year 2000, for the past 25 years, it's been recognized that countries like Brazil, India, China are the fastest economic GDP growing regions, countries, so to speak, poles of capital accumulation and development in the world. So, back to your question with Trump, right? The theory and the strategy for the city of London and the old guard, or what in the parlance is called the cabal, right, in the
Hmm.
United States, in the vernacular, has been to ultimately conquer China. But to do that, they needed to capture the power and strength of Russia. And that's that war of division and occupation. And they almost got it with Kerensky. They almost got it with Kerensky in February of 1917. So then they almost got it again with Yeltsin in the 1990s. Yeah.
Okay, but why China? I mean, China doesn't have any resources, has loads of people. Russia's where all the wealth is.
Yeah, right. So China has human beings are very valuable, and that can be hard for us to appreciate. In obviously, we understand mineral wealth, we understand extraction, we understand um, this arena, right? Of you're talking about effectively commodities. Human beings and labor are a leading commodity. In the Western economies, they had gone upon a course influenced by, and this is subject to debate, of course, to which degree, I don't want to overstate it, but a definite neo-Malthusian approach to population, delimitation of population, and that this was going to lead towards the type of labor shortage disbalances that would promote a rapid course of automation. And they had globally, you have like the Club of Rome and various think tanks and organizations of the Western elites that had arrived at a conclusion, solution that population limitation was the solution. They, in fact, were able to impose that for a while on China. China used to have a one-child policy. They have broken with that for a number of years now. China is now promoting population growth inside of China, right? There's an understanding about human human potential, inventiveness, change, dynamic growth with high population density. In other words, two heads are actually better than one.
Mhm.
Um, the West has obviously been driving very much on, AI, which are glorified large language modules, and actually have limits that when in Western investment circles talking about AI, when they're talking their book, they're not going to be talking about those limits But intelligence is not a language module, and language modules are not going to replace invention, ingenuity, and human intelligence, right? I mean, not for 500 years, perhaps, or more. So this is something that the Chinese are investing in human capital. Anyway, but in answer to your question, Rich, um, they could not take Russia. So now the problem is that the world can learn something from the problems that the British Empire and the American Empire had. And those problems are when you become a victim of your own success. When you study the history of empires in cycles, you can take a
Yeah.
like Toynbee or Spengler, in the cycles of civilization, by the time a civilization is in its peak empire, the underlying mechanics are already dysfunctional.
You're in the UK, actually anywhere, get a VPN. If you want to be able to access all sorts of perspectives that the government thinks are dangerous for you, get a VPN. NordVPN.com/crypto-rich.
It's already pyramidized.
Yeah.
So it's almost like metastatic cancer. It requires growth just to maintain the baseline functionality. So this is ultimately going to create conflict and erosion within. So empires are already eroding from the inside, and they have to grow just to keep to limit the rate of erosion. It's not even like they're flourishing on the inside. Like
No,
they
they're
they
not.
have to grow to limit the rate of erosion on the inside. So we can learn from that. And so societies are learning from that. That's the
Yes.
good news, right? You
Now,
see the good news.
sorry, Joaquin, just
Yes.
in that, and forgive me for interrupting you, and I may do so again, right? But I can see that happening in the UK and in the European Union, where
Mhm.
empire is eating itself because cannibalizing its own people and strip
That's it.
mining them because, France and the UK and Germany are no longer in a position to go and strip mine Africa or Asia or whatever. So, okay, we'll strip mine our own population. But then why, back to Trump, why was Trump such a threat? And why doesn't Trump join forces with the City of London, the British imperialists, in order to, I don't know, profit from the breakup of Russia? He can get some of the booty too.
So they've imagine that we started a nonprofit charity, right, to cure breast cancer. All right. And we have an email list, we have celebrities, we have annual galas. We're raising billions of dollars a year, right? Then let's imagine that breast cancer gets cured. Well, now we have a fucking problem, Rich.
Mhm.
Okay, like we have a revenue stream, we have a donors list, we have an annual gala, we've got the celebrity support. What are we going to do? Well, we've got to redefine cancer, or we've got to say it wasn't actually cured, or something. We need to do something. We have a problem here. You see, it was actually understood 15 years ago that there is no way that Russia is going to be overthrown, destroyed, or divided. The network, the global economic network that Russia is plugged into, cannot be severed from it. And the traditional colonial Western powers, City of London, or the Germans, the French, the Americans, what have you, do not even collectively, like say through NATO, globally or economically, have the power to sever Russia from the rest of the world, because increasingly those former colonial powers do not control the rest of the world.
Mm.
They can't tell India, don't buy Russian gas. They can't tell China, don't sell drone parts to Russia.
Or
So
even Burkina Faso. They can't tell
they
Burkina
can't,
Faso.
right, yeah. So that's the reality, is that the destroy Russia crowd doesn't even really believe at the highest levels that it can be done. That's just their racket. That is their business. That they are selling a product that they know doesn't work. But you understand. So they you can get away with that when you have an empire in some condition. We don't have fucking room for those games anymore. We can't pretend that we have, weapons. Remember, like Star Wars, SDI? Those were fictions. Like we don't have the headroom to fucking pretend to be pursuing, we're tilting at windmills, Rich.
Mm.
And so it's Don Quixote. So there needs to be a sobriety reality check. some, and some recounting. And this is what Team Trump on the American side represents. So people can disagree on the social policies, the rhetoric, they can be, hesitant about the optics about it. Primarily, Rich, at the geopolitical, geostrategic, historical level of analysis, right? This is to normalize US-Russia relations, right? Not against China, but this is a little bit like this requires a little bit of space to explain.
Mhm.
China today doesn't have expansionist imperial ambitions insofar as they have learned from the cycles of empires that we have been discussing earlier. So they don't need to track themselves for demise because they were overextended at a certain point. So they need to have self-conscious limitation of their overextension. The present generation of Chinese leadership has that understanding, but if Russia is not allowed to integrate with Europe or integrate with the United States on joint energy, production, resource, labor, capital intensive projects globally, Venezuela, etc., right? The strategic advantage that China may have in the future, right, will lead to that next generation of Chinese leadership starting to have the aroma of delusions of grandeur, where they might start to think, hey, Siberia looks like future China or something. They might start to think that, hey, those Russian resources, now that Russia is cut off or weakened or not as integrated as they might otherwise be if they were actually encouraged to or even given some help to do that, right? If Russia is not actually promoted, right, or platformed in such a way to extend and integrate globally, then China in the future could get the wrong idea. Not the present Chinese leadership, but you can't, there are 20-year-olds today that in 30 years will be 50. They'll be running the party or whatever system they have. And they're going to have a worldview not based upon the struggles that China went through in the 70s and 80s, which the present leadership in China went through. So this is what I was talking about, Spangler and Toynbee, and these ideas of cycles of civilization and the group psychology of leadership in a given time and place. So
Yeah.
we're ensuring the future, you see, by defining the boundaries in the present, and that requires balancing between Russia and China. And the best way to balance with Russia is to open up Europe and the United States to Russia, right? I mean, China has access. So why shouldn't Russia? Like if you were to not have Russia's not going to be destroyed militarily,
Yeah.
but their growth can be limited only insofar as the degree of access to European and Anglo markets. Right. But you're not going to undermine the regime. You're not going to overthrow them. But in 30 years, the Chinese might be in the position to get the wrong idea about what's Chinese looking about Russia.
Mhm.
You see?
Yeah.
So that's the thinking.
Now, it seems to me that in the background, Trump is working with Russia and possibly also with China
Yes.
to undermine and destroy the influence that the City of London has and the European Union.
Yes, that's right. Yes. The financially the City of London has basically created um, a crisis, a lot of hazard around Ukraine, and they have, on the basis of what was called the Lugano format, which was then the next conference was then held in London about a year and a half ago, 2024, on the division of Ukraine, and they called it the rebuilding and reconstruction on the Lugano format. And at this time, Ukraine had a higher, credit rating. They had a higher rating from the IMF, and you had the spring and summer offensive from the AFU, from the Ukrainian army into certain regions of former Ukraine, like Zaporozhye, which failed catastrophically. They lost 600 tanks, 3,000 infantry fighting vehicles and so forth, 70,000, 80,000 soldiers they lost, and they gained 10 or 20 kilometers deep, which within a year they lost those 20 kilometers. I mean, it was just 20, it's World War I type of,
Mm.
100 meters, 10,000 men, crazy. So they had a whole investment
Sorry,
consortium.
Joaquin, forgive me there. Forgive. I'm
Yeah,
just going to interrupt. I want you to continue what you're saying, right? But I
yeah.
just want to make mention, especially for people in the UK, that the probity code process, notaxforwar.com, which is that it's a criminal offense in the UK, and in fact, in any countries that has ratified the International Convention Against Genocide or terrorism or the financing of terrorism, it's a criminal offense to give any money to any central government or local government agency, directly or indirectly, where some of those proceeds are going to end up in facilitating, funding, or carrying out genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and acts of terrorism.
Hmm.
And the UK government's policies and practices with regards to Yemen, Israel, Ukraine constitute violations of those statutes. Now, if you don't have to believe me or not, right? Go check it out. notaxforwar.com. notaxforwar.com. And what we got to do is we got to stop funding these warmongers who don't care about us and don't care about other people. They just want to profit off mass murder. Just want to get that in.
No, excellent. Yes, I mean that dovetails perfectly. So this war machine, when you hear, what's happening right now with Zelensky, just kind of bring it in to Ukraine and the city of London. Your question is, why doesn't Trump, why can't he align with the city of London? And maybe we can ask, why can't the city of London unwind from this quest to this unwinnable? They recognize it's unwinnable. There's a lot
Mm.
of facts behind this. I don't want to weigh the audience down, but going back to a number of years, people will relate maybe to understand that during the pandemic, the definition of the word pandemic was redefined. The definition of the word vaccine was redefined. Now it's, gene therapy is a vaccine and so forth. This is not my area of competence, but I have that awareness on that level. What I can tell you with very high degree of confidence in my competency is that during the Obama administration, they redefined the definition of hegemony and they redefined Russia's power profile so that they could justify a policy of escalation to signal to Russia too high a cost of proceeding. That redefinition only works if Russia is a local regional hegemon and not a nuclear power. But if Russia is a nuclear power and it is a global hegemon, which by the way means that they can influence things around the world, not that they're the sole total global hegemon. People don't always understand the term hegemon or hegemony globally. Do you have reach? And are you a nuclear power? So they redefined Russia so that even though they knew, it's like they have another set of books where they are based in reality and they understand that Russia cannot be destroyed. They understand that it's a nuclear power. They understand that it's a global hegemon among several. That is not the criteria that they use to justify the war in Ukraine and to attack Russia. So they have a separate set of definitions that you'll see through policy think tanks and institutes that they will amplify and highlight, which would indicate things like Russia's not a global hegemon, or, looking at what has happened in the course of the Ukraine war, Russia's nuclear weapons probably won't land because we can shoot them out of the sky. Patriot batteries will take down Russia's nukes, right? Because look, Zelensky claims that, 9 out of 10 of these were shot down, conventional, but ones that can be armed. Oh look, even the hypersonics don't work. Just fiction, rich fiction. So they promoted this false view that escalation will cause Russia to back down, which is a sound approach if a country is not a nuclear power, if they haven't defined their conflict as existential. So Russia has defined this conflict as existential. They are a nuclear power and they are a global hegemon. Ergo, escalation from the other side to signal to Russia too high a cost to cause them to force them to back down will not work. So then this they actually recognize tacitly, implicitly, while speaking something else. Then after the failed summer offensive that I just mentioned, Blinken made a historic statement. He says, this is, people in the field of international relations, that's my arena, and their professors and so forth. This is going to be textbook from now on. This is history, Rich. The world has changed. The crisis that the West is in, this is not a challenge to the post-Cold War order. This is not a challenge to American unipolar global hegemony, right? This is significant of the fact that that era has passed and it is irrecoverable. We are no longer, there has been a sea change. We are no longer in that territory. That is no longer the world we live in. We are in the world of multipolarity. Russia cannot be defeated militarily. Its relationships with the global South and global East are too strong and intertwined, and that's that. So this was a shocking and historic admission from Blinken during the last year of the Biden administration. So there's two realities, that they've been straddling, right? So the city of London, they need to keep the war going. They have a lot of control. They have a lot of control in European industry and financing industry, and also limiting that. I mean, this is really, for Germany, a continuation of the Versailles Treaty in many ways. Right. A lot of German policy on energy is being manipulated by the British. So they cannot recognize that the war is lost, because the entire investment story would collapse. That's what the Lugano platform is all about. So they have already divided up Ukraine in their minds, in their portfolio, in their investment, that those are the returns that this whole pyramid is sitting on, this whole house of cards.
Yeah. Okay. And then how does Venezuela tie into all of, sorry, just one point. That would explain why Germany has committed suicide.
Correct.
Right? Because Britain and Germany have long been rivals, and France is committing suicide slowly as well. France and Britain have long been rivals. Okay. Now, how does that explain